we'll kick off. Hi, Dr. Mathern. Great to have you with us today. So as I
Morning.
mentioned, Superintendent Harris is the superintendent in Fremont School District number 1, and Dr. Mathern is the current chairman of the State Board of Education. And so grateful to have you both for this first session that is really about, a vision for Wyoming students, talking to leadership at the district level, but also at the state level with the State Board of Education. And so I thought before we jump into some questions, if each of you can speak a little bit to the relationship of both of your boards with parents and how that can better be improved, how parents can better engage with boards, what that means to you, and what that looks like from a parent's perspective that might be new to getting involved in this process and advocating for their child. Go ahead, Superintendent Harris.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent Degenfelder. Good morning, everyone. I think it's really key when parents are thinking about school board members to remember that many of those members, if not all of them on our current board and lander, are parents of current or former students in our school district. So they share a lot of the same perspectives. They've been through a lot of the same experiences. And in many ways, they're going to be an ally. They should be an ally. They should be a partner in helping you navigate whatever's going on with your student or whatever issue you see in the school district or whatever you like and want to see continue. They really are representatives of the community. And again, in most cases, they're parents themselves. So there shouldn't be much daylight there in terms of like what the objectives are, or what the common goals are.
Great. Dr. Mathern.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being part of this panel, and just thanks to all the parents who are willing to spend some time thinking about public education and all the work that is connected to it. The State Board of Wyoming, we're called the Wyoming State Board of Education, is also a group of volunteers who volunteer to be part of this board that really just looks at 4 or 5 major components for all of public education, including standards is just one example, learning standards. But to the superintendent's point, how do you stay connected with the state board? In our requirement, if you will, in statute, we are asked to get feedback from many different groups. And so for parents to connect to the state board, it's really looking for those public announcements where you'll see some sort of announcement that says the state board is looking for feedback on a specific item. And we take that feedback, we pull it all together, we use that feedback to help adjust some of the work that we're doing. And so looking for those public comment options are crucial. The other piece is during every board meeting, which we have only about eight a year, that board meeting generally almost always has a public comment section. And so board members and members of the public can log in and make comments. Sometimes you can come in person, or you can do it on Zoom or some other method. Even if you write the state board a letter, our coordinator will share that letter with all board members so that you see it. So I think in terms of how can parents work best with our board, it's really connected with that idea of public comment and providing feedback. If you have an issue that's more local or more specific to your child, it's really best to go locally. Start with wherever the issue originated. Go to the school district folks who can funnel that information to the board. And of course, in all of those board meetings, there's always an opportunity to provide feedback as well. So those are just some suggestions. One other thing, Superintendent, I would add is once in a while when we are relooking at standards, for example, right now we're looking at language arts standards, we're looking at current technical standards, we're looking at social studies standards. There's generally a call for some member of the public to join those committee meetings and be part of that review. So again, if you see that call, if you see that announcement, there's an opportunity to get involved in some of the work of the state board.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Mathern. And just a reminder to folks too that your local school board is elected, elected by the people. Those elections matter. And so they should be, responsive to the voters of the community. And then on the State Board of Education, those members are appointed by the governor. So, built into that should be, that you have elected officials that are beholden to the voters. And so be involved in that process and make sure that you're voting and engaged with who's running for school board, and then those appointments for the State Board of Education. Now let's kind of jump into just kind of, what's going on at the local board level and at the state board, and in balancing things like academic innovation and with personalized learning. One thing that we've really tried to do at the state level is to look outside the box of just that one size fits all model for education, less focus on just teaching to a test and more about how do we get kids, more prepped for real jobs and to be good American citizens. Superintendent Harris, I know you guys have done a lot of that within your district. Could you talk a little bit about partnerships you've had with local businesses and other community stakeholders to really integrate that work-based learning, particularly in the high school experience? I know you've had programs like apprenticeships and industry-recognized credentials. And so I wondered if you could speak to that and how those decisions are made at the local level.
Sure. Thank you for that. I'm really proud of what we're doing in Lander in this area, although we can certainly do more. There's definitely more opportunity there. But I want to just start by just saying the point of high school is to ensure that students are prepared for what happens after high school. The point is not high school itself, it's being prepared to become an independent adult and a citizen of our state. So we want our graduates to be able to succeed in the career of their choice, whether that involves more formal education or on-the-job training or not. So in the Lander School District here, much of that preparation happens in our career and technical education classes, although a lot is driven by individual students as well. Many of our Lander Valley High School students establish their own community experience classes with the principal's permission, where they're allowed to leave campus to work at a job of their choosing, and the student's employer also has to sign off on that. But once that's approved, students can earn half an elective credit for each approved community experience class. And for some of our seniors, that means they are in the workplace over half of the time for multiple class periods in their schedule. So they're effectively earning high school credit and wages at the same time, along with all the on-the-job training that goes with that. As far as apprenticeships, we can definitely improve in this area, but we've got some good organization going, some good partnerships going for students who want to go straight into the trades after graduation. One of those is with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, or IBEW. They're opening doors for our students who are interested in working as electricians or linemen. And we've had a lot of students who pursue that right after high school. Military science is offered at both high schools in Lander. We've got a lot of kids who enlist every year, a small number who go to the service academies as well. And then one of the main things that I'd like to highlight is in our main high school, Lander Valley High School, we have a lot of in-school certifications that students can earn, and that gives them a big advantage when it comes to a job applicant pool. So an example would be like ServSafe for any students who might be working in food service, or various OSHA 10-hour certifications for folks who want to work in construction or agriculture or other industries. I was talking to a sophomore last week who completed one of the courses on trailer towing, got certified to tow a trailer. And he's excited because that means more opportunities for summer work for him. And judging from what I've seen around different campgrounds and trailheads over the years, I think probably that course needs to catch on more widely throughout the state. But those are just some examples where we're trying to get kids interested in what happens after high school and giving them opportunities to see the links between what they're doing in high school and what comes next.
And so, Superintendent, a follow-up on that, if there's, if it's a parent or just a business in the community that they would want to get more engaged or provide a program for that, how does that come together? How do those relationships happen? How does that collaboration happen?
A lot of that happens with coordination between our high school. We have a job coach, and then we also have some CTE educators who are fresh out of the industry, whether that's auto mechanics or working for the Conservation District or the U.S. Department of Agriculture. they know a lot of the producers and a lot of the different sectors within those industries, and they're able to link kids up with those opportunities. A couple of those teachers are just in their first year this school year, but we imagine that those opportunities will continue to expand. Lander's not a very big town, so once it starts to get out that our kids are looking for these opportunities and they have these certifications, we have some employers who come to us. I'm thinking of like a local auto body shop. They're looking for people who have experience in the shop at the high school and want to get started in their shop with employment, which is what we're looking for. A lot of it's right now word of mouth, but we're starting to get more momentum with that, and we'll probably get some more marketing materials and start advertising that more in the local community and through the Chamber of Commerce too.
Great. I think that relationship's really important, and making sure that business and industry know that it doesn't have to just be wondering what's going on in the school, but actually having that relationship, I think. And at the state level, we're working on how do we create a network across the state? Because as we find, sometimes you've got a great relationship between a teacher and a company, but if one of those people retires or leaves, then sometimes that relationship can go away. And so how can we create that permanency for a student to be able to take advantage of? Now, Dr. Mathern, turning to you, this has been a focus of the State Board of Education with statewide standards for graduation and updating those, as well as the profile of a graduate. How do you see these changes impacting the high school experience for students now and in the future?
Thank you, Superintendent. Mike, what you talked about really is a local version of what the state board is working on for the entire state. So a few years ago, we adopted something called the profile of a graduate. And I think your back channel person is going to drop that link into the chat box for the participants here. And I just want to point out a few things about that, because that's the foundational document that we're talking about for the impacting students' experiences. This profile was created after many, many, many listening sessions. Literally thousands of people across the state of Wyoming contributed to the creation of this document. We even talked with students who dropped out of school. We talked with students who found great success in their school setting. We talked with industry. We talked with businesses, parents, and those ideas came together to create this profile of a graduate that you'll see in the chat box. And at the bottom of the profile, you will see some specific standards that the board has taken, and we called them competencies. They've now been converted, in a sense, to graduation standards. The main one, the first one, is really this idea of students being able to apply and transfer that knowledge that they've acquired in the classroom. So it isn't just the idea of, memorizing a bunch of facts and then doing well on a test and getting an A in a class. The graduation standards really call for that application of that knowledge in either a new situation or in a more sophisticated situation. So how does that translate? Well, it could be a meaningful internship, or maybe a work-based learning component, or a competency-based learning, or a capstone, or some sort of hands-on project where they have to apply that learning. And this idea that these experiences are somehow sort of less than what was happening in the classroom, I think just isn't true. It's really about academic rigor, but it's also the idea of surpassing what is happening with memorization. We're already hearing stories about students in work-based learning environments, internships leading to summer employment, businesses saying, wow, this student that was placed at our site, we want that student to have a job once they finish college, or whatever their pathway is connected with. So we also see this as a powerful way to recapture that student's senior year. I know sometimes with some of the seniors I've talked to, they'll say, "Well, I've got all my credits, so this is kind of a simple, easy year for me." But the state board is saying, "Wow, you've got 4 years of education here that there's no tuition. Go for it. Use all 4 years and use that last year, or maybe beginning your junior year, and get out there and start applying some of that knowledge and those skills that you've gained in the classroom." We also think that the way the board has designed this profile and the graduation standards, it can't be done without local community input. And so, what does that mean? Well, it means conversations with the local businesses, with people, maybe even people that are running a business out of their home. What are those areas where a student could learn additional set of skills that are connected to what they learned in the classroom? So part of our invitation at the state board is for each community in the entire state to have these dialogues about how they can help the student apply and transfer that knowledge. Matter of fact, personally, I'm not speaking for the board here. I'm not sure the profile can be completely realized just inside the local school. I think it needs the community to help these students get to that level. And Superintendent Harris talked about that, some of the partnerships they're building in Lander already. Our state board sees this happening in the entire state.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Mathern. And, I think one thing to keep in mind in this discussion is when we talk about making this shift, and moving, from just that teaching to the test and memorizing textbooks, to more of this hands-on learning, experiential learning, it really takes all of these entities coming together, because we have checks and balances in education. The state superintendent has authority, but the state board does. And then, as I mentioned earlier, local school districts have a lot of autonomy. And so to change this system, we have to all be working towards it and make those changes together. Most folks, in communities or parents might not understand that we have the state accountability system, and that is ultimately approved by the State Board of Education in consultation with the superintendent and the Department of Education. And that accountability system is how we measure how schools are doing, and we give them kind of their categories that they fall into. Now, that system is largely measured by testing. And so one thing that we are working on right now is how do we update the accountability model, especially for high school students, to give credit to schools that are doing these things. Because as we know, not all schools across the state of Wyoming are equal in their providing of these internships or hands-on learning. So how do we make that part of the model that incentivizes them to do that? And so Superintendent Harris, we've got a question in the chat because, local schools, they're not all doing it the same. And so question is, that their particular school has said that it's hard to get qualified teachers to supervise these kind of programs. How does Lander handle that?
It's a great question because it's very true. A lot of teachers who come through a traditional teacher prep program aren't used to this type of an approach, where the student's learning needs to be applied in a new or novel concept or in a new context, like Dr. Mathern was talking about. We've really looked hard at the alternate routes to certification with PTSB. We've got a couple of our CTE folks who came through the consultant specialist certification program. So people that are fresh out of the industry that are interested in working with high school students, we see that as a very viable and valuable way to get those professionals in front of our students and still meet the requirements of certification through PTSB. We think that's awesome. Several of these people are working with students in other contexts, either as employers or coaches. And we say, hey, here's someone who's got some expertise in this area that can light a fire with our students and help them see how school leads to career. And those are the people we've actively recruited in Lander, rather than just relying on the traditional types of candidates that you get through traditional teacher prep programs.
Dr. Mathern.
Yes, if I could just add to what Superintendent Harris is speaking about. Um, the state superintendent Degenfelder and I were on some committees where we were looking for how do we remove some barriers that are occurring, just like what came in the chat box about finding qualified teachers. One of the barriers we discovered was that the Professional Teaching Standards Board only allowed CTE teachers to go out into the field and supervise students at work sites. So your shop teacher, your foods teacher, those kind of. And so we worked on removing that barrier by actually providing the potential for any teacher to be what I'll call a job coach or a supervisor who can go out with the student or supervise the student. For example, what if I'm a social studies teacher and I have a student that would like to do an internship at a local law firm? There was no means to do that. We had to go to the CTE teacher and say, "Hey, will you supervise this student at the law firm?" It didn't make sense. It seemed like it would be better if maybe a political science teacher or someone who would do that supervision. So PTSB, the Professional Teaching Standards Board, now has a course that any teacher can take to become a facilitator or become again, for lack of a better term, a job coach who could supervise and be part of that whole process. I ultimately think, back to the superintendent's comment, that if we're going to individualize learning for every child, we are going to have more and more adults who will be coaching on the side and helping students realize their potential, as opposed to being on the stage and imparting knowledge. It's the transfer of this knowledge is going to become the teachers coaching them in that process.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Mathern. Superintendent Harris, so curious too of how we incentivize districts to do more of this, like you all are doing. How do we get more companies or different opportunities there? And then also, how do we communicate that to students? How do students learn about it? And then, sorry, this is a long question, but also to talk a little bit more about those job coaches. Not every district has a job coach, and so I think there's confusion of what a counselor does. Is it mental health counseling? Is it that career preparedness? And so how do you differentiate that, and what is their role to communicate that with students?
All right, I'll try to keep track of that. I think there were three parts to that question. I think I'll start with the job coach piece, and Superintendent Degenfelder, if you don't mind reminding me of the first two parts. The job coach concept is just something we kind of borrowed from special education. All special education, individualized education programs will require a post-secondary transition plan, and that's great thinking for any high school student. The requirement in special education is the year in which the student turns 16, the team starts to contemplate these post-secondary transition pieces and then plans and provides services to get the student to their post-secondary goals. We're kind of borrowing from that a little bit and saying that's good for any student. High school graduation is the start of something new. It's not the end of something. So we're trying to incorporate those themes and those ideas into the broader population of students. Right now we have one job coach. But I think, as Dr. Mathern pointed out, really the job coach idea and responsibility lies with all the adults in the high school. Everybody's got to have that future orientation of it's not about my class or my content. It's about what these students do with the knowledge and skills they learn after they graduate. And so shifting that to our North Star, and our North Star is no longer just the diploma. It's the diploma as a step towards what we're going to do individually in terms of college, career, military service, volunteerism, and just being a civic person, a good citizen in the state. I think there was another question about how do you communicate with students? How do you get students excited about that? We've tried a couple different things, and it's really a lot of marketing. When we have eighth graders who are getting ready to transition to ninth grade, we do an eighth grade parent night, and we have all the tables set up from all the different departments in the school and pieces of examples of work that students have produced in all these different areas. And we kind of do a sales pitch as parents walk throughout the commons area of the high school. They go from table to table and hear from teachers and some of our current students about what they're doing in those departments, what they're doing in those classes, and what that leads to hopefully after high school. So we get them excited before they even enter high school. We have a jump start program for incoming ninth graders also. Some of the students who are struggling in eighth grade, we select them for the jump start. We get them excited about high school and give them some hands-on activities and field work experiences, not really bearing credit, but getting them excited about being in the high school setting and getting them oriented to this application of learning instead of just rote learning for learning's sake.
That's great.
And then, there's other options too. We do a student showcase that's open to the public. We just had it last week where we take a lot of student product, whether that's poetry or foods from our foods and nutrition classes, or welding pieces or fine art work or whatever it happens to be, woodworking, metalwork. We put that out in the commons and we have an open house, so to speak, where the press is there and we have all kinds of students and parents and staff who show up to see what students are making, what they're doing in terms of a hands-on application or a creative thinking with the concepts that we're trying to impart in terms of our classes. So those are a couple things we're doing. The showcase idea, I think we need to find a different venue and have that open more than one night, because we always hear it's too short. I can't make it that night, and people miss out, and the photographs don't really do it. We also have the students there to talk about their work. And it's really, really powerful when you're hearing from a student about how they took the basic expectation and a standard and expanded on that in a creative way that lit the fire in their minds for something they want to do with their own time, not just as part of a class. So that's really, really valuable.
That's great. And before I'll kick it to you, Dr. Mathern, because it reminds me too of our last state board meeting. We had Shoshone schools tell us that they have a career aptitude test that they're having all of their students take. And actually, it's the same one that we have all of the Sheridan County school districts and Johnson County are taking. And so it's interesting as some districts are starting to implement, a district-wide career aptitude and then base some of these initiatives on those pathways for students. So Dr. Mathern.
So both superintendents, I love what you're suggesting here, and that is, how does the state board umbrella translate locally? And I want to go back to that umbrella for a second. I dropped into the chat the change in our graduation requirements. This is statewide. There are these competencies, these 7 key competencies that I talked about earlier, that it isn't just the knowledge, it's the application and the transfer. And so also in that document, and I don't know if the person who's running the background can put that link in again to the state board site, but we have our graduation requirements. And in that requirement are things like this: a student success plan. Every student needs to have a student success plan. What is the set of goals? What's the channel that student is going to use to march across that stage in a few years? That goes back to Superintendent Harris's point about some kind of a learning plan. But it's required of all of our graduation students for the class of 2031, which I can't believe is going to be here pretty soon. But it's really that freshman class that starts in 27, 28. Some other pieces that are in there, back to the parents' question about how do I find out about all this stuff? If you recall, in your local school district, high school's handbook, there's probably a list of, here are the 17 or 25 things that a student has to have to graduate. Well, now in that handbook, as the districts work on this, will be the different opportunities locally that a student could access. Maybe it is an internship, maybe it's some work study. It's really up to the local district to say, how can we translate this state expectation? How can we translate that into the resources that we have here locally? And so we don't want to keep parents in the dark here. I mean, if you don't know where the target is, where do you aim? And I think this is really important to keep in mind, that as we get ready for that freshman class of 27, 28, do districts have these pieces in place so that students know all of the different opportunities that they have and that they can access locally. I do want to go on if I can, Superintendent. I know you had a question about, what are we seeing in some other districts in addition to Lander that are sort of moving us this way. And I don't know if you're ready for that question or, okay, I see a nod. So I do want to talk about each community is different. When you look at the profile of a graduate, you'll see four major components: learn, work, contribute, and thrive. Well, depending on the local community, each of those words might mean something different. Maybe if you're in a situation where working is a huge deal. I'm thinking, for example, Pinedale's nuclear site coming up. Maybe that is the most important column to think about. Maybe community service is a big deal for a different community, and so maybe contribute is part of that. It just depends on that conversation locally. So here are some examples of things that the board has already seen. Superintendent, you mentioned something. We heard from some students in Shoshone where, a very small school, yet every single student has their own plan, and the school has figured out how to access each of those plans. You don't need 15 kids in a class to offer that ag class. Maybe there's one or two, and they've figured out a pathway for that student and who has an ag interest. Cody has a classroom to careers program that, quite frankly, is a K-12 continuum where they've taken the profile and said, this isn't just for high school. This might fit our community K-12. They've made connections with the healthcare industry there. And they have, I want to say, I might be wrong, but I think they have like 100 partnerships that they've already built with local businesses on how to connect the community to the student interests. Another example is in Sheridan and Johnson County. They're working on some student pathways based on the interests and aptitude of the student and connected with the community college there. And we talked about Shoshone. In Weston County, Upton is they've been using a capstone idea, for your senior year. Here's the project you've been working on. Well, that used to just be for CTE students. Now they're expanding it to all students. So those are four examples around the state where districts are saying we can make this happen with local input.
Yeah, that's great. And so I do, and this fits with the question we just had in the chat as well on how do we measure this stuff? Because there's a reason why we've used test scores to evaluate how schools and districts are doing, because it's easy. It's the easiest way to do that with data and numbers. And I think that's something we're grappling with as we speak of how will we measure this? How do we give credit? Is it based on hours of work-based learning or internship time? Is it based on some sort of, testing or measurement and in that sense? And so wondering, both of you, of how do we go about that? I mean, knowing that we don't have a perfect solution here, but where should we be looking of how do we ensure that this is effectively measured in the schools? Dr. Mathern?
Don't mind. I want us to hearken back to our own days in school. And that is that the teacher had some expectations for us in each class, and every class was different. For my English teacher, there was a certain set of expectations. For the science teacher, it was a different set. And an A meant something different in each class. What we have that's continuous, if you will, in the entire state are our state standards. But in the graduation policy, we're saying this decision about how do you measure should be left up to the local school board, left up to the local school about what they consider someone who has mastered or met that competency. I think it fits nicely into our state's local control effort. And we still have the state test. I mean, that's not going away. But the idea of somehow reducing graduation to a score on a test, I think, is anathema to really what we're suggesting here. We are suggesting that as students get older, as students move into the workplace, a single score does not predict success. It's really the idea of, is there evidence they can learn, work, contribute, and thrive? And who better to make that judgment, I think, than the local school district that says, there's a student walking across that stage that I know will contribute to our community because I've seen him do it in the internship, in the summer work, in whatever he's done. I do want to add one other piece to this, Superintendent, and that is that it's really changing an attitude here that learning occurs anywhere, anytime. It does not have to be in fifth period class when I take, a local required subject. It's really acknowledging that I use this often. The FFA program, what a profound program where students are challenged to have projects, they're challenged to report on it, they're challenged to publicly speak, they're challenged to showcase their work. Somehow, the local school district, from the state board's perspective, will have the authority to acknowledge that work and figure out a way to use that as evidence that this student is indeed ready to graduate.
Superintendent Harris, any thoughts on that, on measurement of some of these things?
Sure. I agree wholeheartedly with everything Dr. Mathern said. I do think also that there are some pieces of academic work that could serve to serve as measurements for some of these pieces that we're seeing here. I do think also in terms of measurement, if we have a student success plan or a post-secondary plan of some sort, it's going to be really important that we get input on the students' ability to meet these requirements from the people involved in that post-secondary or in that off-site work. They may not be educators, but we need a piece of input from the attorney who's supervising the internship or the lead mechanic at the shop where the student is doing these work experience courses or classes. It can't just be on individual teachers, I don't think. I think this is a system that involves a lot of different facets, and input from all those different players would be important, I think, to measure it appropriately.
Great. Now, with just a couple minutes left, I do want to talk about how we incentivize this to other schools and districts. So Superintendent Harris, if parents are hearing, some of these good things that you guys are doing and these partnerships and opportunities for kids for hands-on learning and work-based learning, how did they bring that, if that's not going on, to that extent in their school or district, how do they approach that? How do they bring that as an idea? How do they get that going in their school?
Well, I think it's an urgent matter. I think you can look at a couple of different pieces of data. I saw data recently that 1 in 3 adult men in America are not in the workforce, and they're not looking for work. That's a huge economic issue and a social issue for our nation. You look at dropout statistics or the percentage of kids that are participating in public school, the relevance piece comes up. What are these kids doing with their time if we're not giving them a pathway to success as an adult? If we're failing there and we're doing too much time or too much emphasis on theoretical academic concepts with no clear bridge to applicability or transfer in the real world, then we're going to lose those students. And where do they go after that if they don't have the skills needed to get a high school diploma? Can they support a family? Can they contribute to society? Will they be voters? I mean, those are the questions that come up. So really, it is an urgent question. The world is changing so quickly. Schools have to adapt. There's just really no way around it. The traditional approach is not going to cut it with the way things are moving with technology and the demands of industry. So I think if a school board can't get excited about it on an academic level, they need to get excited about it on a societal level or an economic level at least, because this is about the well-being of our communities and the future of our state.
And superintendent, how would a parent go about that? I mean, straight to the superintendent, talk to school board members, talk to the principal. What would you recommend?
I would say, kind of all of the above. I mean, some of these are direct issues that would affect a high school principal. Some are more district-wide for a superintendent, and some are more appropriate for the school board, I think, in terms of the vision of the district. What type of a system do we want to be K-12 to ensure that our graduates have these skills and competencies and are able to do the things called for in the profile of a graduate? I think any point of entry that a parent feels comfortable with would be a good place to start. And then wherever that point of entry happens, I hope the person receiving that input or that question or that conversation from a parent would broaden that out and take that to an administrative team and a school board and say, hey, we know this is coming down the line with the profile of a graduate. Let's get ahead of it. Things are moving quickly. We don't need to wait for this freshman class that's coming up when the law actually takes effect. Let's get a jump start on it. We know there are other districts doing things. We want to be on the forefront of this, and it's for for the betterment of our students.
Great. And Dr. Mathern.
Yes, thank you. I have to get a little theoretical here because I actually did my doctorate on parent involvement. I want you to think about three circles. And in the circles, you have the word family, school, and community. Now, I want you to push those circles together in your mind and challenge us to think about it this way. How can we have school-like homes? How can we have family-like schools? And how can we have community-like schools? And I think it goes back to your question, Superintendent Degenfelder. How can parents connect with this? Many ways. You can attend trainings, parent classes, parent information, college night, some course on AI. Maybe there's a new math program, or you can just increase the means of communication. It's no longer important just to think about email. There are translators out there if you speak a different language. There's WhatsApp, there's school apps, there's texting, there's even Zoom meetings. Volunteering. The idea of literally volunteering to be on these different groups that are going to have this conversation. Or decision-making groups. Maybe there's a local PTA, or maybe there's a cabinet or an advisory council that, and if, especially if we work on times that parents can manage. Don't do it in the middle of the day when parents are working. Have these meetings when parents can be there. And then maybe it isn't functioning as a parent. Maybe it's functioning as a community member. Maybe you are a welder at a local shop, or maybe you run a flower shop, and you hear about this thing as a business owner or as someone who works with the local Rotary or some other group. You can raise this question that Superintendent Harris is talking about. Say, hey, I heard that graduation requirements are changing. How are we going to do this locally? So I think you can do it as a parent. You can do it as a volunteer. You can do it as a member of business. All of these groups really have to come together, I think, in order to make to help that child be successful. So, back to your question, Superintendent Degenfelder, it's really the idea that if there's one way that's preventing you, think about a different way to have that conversation.
Superintendent Degenfelder, we were unable to hear you at this time.
There we go. All right, now I'm unmuted. And we are working on getting that chat open to everyone. I'm not sure why that isn't open. So we'll work on getting that done. Want to thank our panelists for this first session, kind of talking of the future vision for education in Wyoming. High level, it's about how we're moving away from just purely teaching to tests and really about what it takes to prepare kids for actual jobs and to be good patriotic citizens. We didn't even jump into some questions that I had around artificial intelligence and how that's part of the future. But I think, more of that discussion to come. I appreciate you both talking about how we can expect the education system to be changing. And I think it's important for parents to know that that this can happen and that we need to push our districts, our schools into going in that direction and thinking outside the box and looking at what the future in educating students are. I think it's safe to say that leadership at the state level is supportive of this. And so we are really hoping to get that to happen at a local district level as well. So Dr. Mathern and Superintendent Harris, thank you very much for joining me in this discussion of the future of where we see education going. I think it's a good kickoff into today before we get into the weeds of greater parental involvement in all different areas. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your insights, comments, and questions. That was awesome. We do have 15 minutes before our next session. If there's anyone else that would like to post a question in the chat, we would love to facilitate on our end and see if we can answer some of your questions.
There we go. I guess if we've got a little bit of time, Kim, then maybe I will just kind of jump into, if you're up for it, Dr. Mathern and Superintendent Harris on AI and kind of talk about that, because I think that is something that we are starting to really take a look at the state level, what that means for education. And so as a local district superintendent, if you could touch on kind of, are you guys starting to explore that? What does that look like for the future of education? And then, as I said, folks, we're working on updating this chat so everyone can see. And so stay tuned for that, but plug your questions in there as we go.
Well, I know the Wyoming Department of Ed is working on some AI information. The state board as well. We have a couple of folks that are going to be talking with us about it. The question I think the state board is asking is how can AI be ethically used in our organization? Quite frankly, not only as a board member, but how can it be used in education? And given what AI can do, this really raises a question even about our state standards. And I don't mean to diminish AI because it's extremely powerful and quite frankly scary. But I want to go all the way back to the debate that our math teachers had about when the introduction of the calculator occurred. The question became, when do we have students use the calculator and when do we have students not use the calculator? I think that same question is going to apply or does apply to AI. Some of the standards can be realized when a students use AI as a tool to help them meet the standard, if indeed there's an issue of trying to take a knowledge concept and transition it to something else. So it isn't about how do we prevent its use from the state board's perspective. It's really how do we ethically and impactfully use AI in the classrooms, as opposed to how do we prevent it? And I think that's one of the board's wonderings at this point.
I would agree with Dr. Mathern there. We're probably not going to get away from artificial intelligence in education. It's just too deeply integrated into so many of the applications and different programs that we use. But we've been talking about AI in Lander for several years now, and the board locally here approved an AI policy in September of 24. The underlying principle there with that policy is that AI serves a supportive and consultative role and must not replace human responsibilities. So we're not interested in can a student type a prompt into AI and get an answer. We need them to use that as they're learning to come up with a product that is uniquely and authentically their own. So we're training our teachers and staff on specific tools with an eye toward those that meet our privacy and transparency requirements, and throughout the curriculum, helping students learn to use these tools ethically. And ethically, again, means, is it your own learning? Is it your own work? Similar to the calculator or the use of search engines when those came on board in the 90s, you need to be able to discern information and put it together in a way that's your own. So I think another piece to keep in mind here is how we measure student learning. Our assessments can't focus solely on just the final product. With AI as such an important piece of how students are working now, we need to assess students in various ways throughout the learning process to ensure that they're doing their own work, not just parroting something from AI. So AI is everywhere. It looks like it's here to stay. It's only going to gain a larger foothold in what we're doing in work and in school, but we just need to make sure students know how to deal with the technology properly and make sure our educators are aware of how to assess work in ways that measures students' learning and not just what a computer told the student.
Great.
Interesting, Superintendent, that one of the students we met with last week said, this is just one student's opinion. They don't think AI is going to put people out of work. They do think those who don't know how to effectively use AI as a tool may find themselves out of future possibilities or future opportunities. So trying to figure that out, I think, is part of the challenge.